every Smash stage. Every stage in Super Smash Bros. Has a ton of love poured into it, referencing dozens of video games across history down to the smallest details. And as the reference guy, I've been asked for this I don't know how many times. I've always just put it off because it's a big task, but it's also not so big that it would take me years to do it. And I'm finally caving. We're gonna tackle this game by game. For the most part, I'm gonna focus on just the first version of a stage, how it appeared in its debut game. There will be some exceptions where we talk about upgrades or changes in future appearances, but for the most part, we're going to stick to the first appearance. Okay, enough stalling, here we go. Every single stage in Super Smash Bros. So the first ever stage we'll be talking about is none other than Peach's Castle. This stage is a bit of an oddball. Smash presents the stage as the top of Peach's Castle from Super Mario 64, with a matching tower in the center and the background of the stage being an aerial shot of the castle as a whole. However, there are also plenty of elements that are just kind of thrown together from other levels in the game. The main platform's floor is taken from the lobby of the castle, the bridges from Hyrule Mountain, and even these Lego blocks from Bowser in the Dark World. The stage also has a bumper hovering left to right as a hazard, though this doesn't really have any basis for Mario 64. Exclusively in Smash 64, a Lakitu will also occasionally fly by, representing the Lakitu who controls the camera in Mario 64. But in all later versions of this stage, this Lakitu is missing. Next up is Donkey Kong's home turf, Kongo Jungle, spelled with a C in Smash 64, but changing to being spelled with a K in all future games. Kongo Jungle is a stage inspired by the aesthetic of Donkey Kong Country, the soft reboot of the Donkey Kong franchise. As a whole, this stage's elements are taken from the appearance of levels found in Kongo Jungle, the first world of the first Donkey Kong Country game, with wooden buildings and platforms being a staple for the levels. The sunset environment for the stage is taken from Orangutan Gang, where this same sunset gradient is used in the background. Kongo Jungle also has a barrel with an arrow moving underneath it. Barrels are another staple in Donkey Kong Country with many uses, one of which being to blast the Kongs forward in the direction it's currently facing. This barrel functions similarly by moving side to side and also occasionally rotating. If the player is too low to recover on the stage, they can aim for the barrel and get blasted to the stage by either pressing a button or waiting out the timer. Arrow barrels originate from Donkey Kong Country 2, however these ironically don't move in their home game. The barrel in Smash likely contains the arrow just to make it easier to determine which direction the barrel is facing. Next, we have the first ever Zelda series stage, Hyrule Castle. This stage is a well-done adaptation of the highest section of Hyrule Castle from Ocarina of Time, which is also the game Link in Smash 64 is based on. The only changes made to this section is giving the middle tower platforms to walk on and raising the far right spire to make it playable. The background for the stage features Death Mountain, a looming volcano that can be seen from nearly everywhere while out in Hyrule. So thematically this works well for the stage, since you would also be able to see Death Mountain in Ocarina of Time. Hyrule Castle also has occasional tornadoes that appear as hazards that spin players caught in them and launch them upward. While this exact function doesn't take place in Zelda games of the era, the recorder in The Legend of Zelda has the ability to summon a tornado and teleport Link to different dungeons, which could possibly be where this is derived from. Our next stage is Planet Zebes from the Metroid series. Planet Zebes is a sort of destroyed cave-style stage, with the notable attribute of having acid as a hazard that regularly rises and falls, forcing the players to change where they fight. Zebes is the planet that both Metroid and Super Metroid take place on, though the stage itself isn't exactly a direct connection to anything specific. Elements of the stage are pulled from Metroid, however. The platform's design is borrowed from some of the tiles found in Norfair. The acid itself is taken from the appearance of acid in Metroid, while the concept of rising acid is taken from Super Metroid, where lava would rise in certain areas of the game. In the background of the stage, you will occasionally see Ridley, pretty much the most popular boss in all of Metroid, and some Wavers, another more common type of enemy. At the bottom of the stage, we can see what appears to be a map, which is likely based on the layout of rooms and hallways found in the Metroid series. This is one of the few stages that has never returned in any capacity in any Smash game, making it a Smash 64 exclusive that was since replaced by a similar stage that we'll talk about in a bit. Next up, we have the only unlockable stage in Smash 64, Mushroom Kingdom. This stage gets its design from Super Mario Bros., with some bits translated into 3D. The foreground features some platforms, POW blocks, bricks, and pipes. The pipes also have piranha plants that occasionally rise out of them, taken straight from the game. You can crouch on these pipes and they will actually allow you to use them to warp, though rather than take you to a new area, it will simply send you to a random pipe elsewhere on the stage. This stage also has the balance lifts, which are not only only fully functional, but actually take a character's weight into consideration. Heavy characters make these fall quicker than lighter characters, and if 2 characters are on each ends, the scale will adjust accordingly. This also means that if characters are equal weight, the power lift will be completely balanced. The POW block isn't actually from Super Mario Bros., but rather the arcade Mario Bros., probably just added to throw in some chaos to the stage. In the background, you can see some bullet bills, buzzy beetles, clouds, and mushrooms to all match up with the aesthetic of Super Mario Bros. But you may notice that the 64 version of this stage kinda feels almost like knockoff Mario Bros. In some areas, particularly in the colors of sprites and their proportions to one another. All of this changed in Mushroom Kingdom's only return from 64 in Smash Ultimate. This time around, the stage looks far more uniform size-wise, and moreover, it looks like they straight up ripped the sprites from Super Mario Bros. Rather than recreating everything. So color-wise, it looks closer too. Functionally, however, this stage is essentially the same, with minor background elements really being the only changes. For Mario, we next move to Yoshi and his stage. Yoshi's Island, as it's named in Smash 64 and Melee, and Super Happy Tree, as it's named in Ultimate. This is naturally Yoshi's home stage in 64, and it has a very arts and crafts type feel to it, which makes sense when we look at its inspiration, Yoshi's story. In this game, the Super Happy Tree is the source of all happiness for the Yoshis, and Baby Bowser steals the Super Happy Tree and turns Yoshi's Island into a picture book. So the Super Happy Tree is in the background of the stage, with the actual stage design being sort of original for Smash. However, aesthetically, it gets its cardboard appearance from the first level of the game, and its more fabric appearance from the second and third levels. There are also clouds that appear over the abyss on the left and right of the stage, and will despawn after a certain amount of time after a player has landed on them. The 64 version of the stage also features message blocks taken from Yoshi's story, though these are in the background of the stage above the clouds and serve no function in Smash. Next up, we have honestly one of my favorite stages in all of Smash, Dreamland from the Kirby series. This colorful stage is inspired by Green Greens, originally from Kirby's Dream Land, but more based on the appearance from Kirby Superstar. The stage also prominently features Wispy Woods, a giant tree with a face who serves as the first boss of the previously mentioned games. Though he has other attacks in his home game, on this stage he simply blows wind either left or right, pushing players in the respective direction, but dealing no damage. The background of this stage is a very low-quality top-down view of Dreamland, the world from Kirby. Additionally, in the background you can occasionally see either King Dedede or Bronto Burts flying across, just for a little ambiance. Our next stage is Sector Z from the Star Fox series. This stage features the Great Fox, Team Star Fox's mothership, traveling through space with debris and missiles flying by on the screen. Occasionally, our wings will fly by during gameplay and fire lasers at players, dealing damage to them. Sector Z is an area of the Lilat system in Star Fox 64, appropriately named because of the Z shape in the area. During the course of Star Fox 64, Team Star Fox heads to Sector Z based on a lead, but gets ambushed, with the Great Fox being threatened by Copperhead missiles. The stage in Smash is a recreation of this level, complete with the background of the stage even being an image of Sector Z from the game. This is yet another stage that did not return in any future Smash games, again being spiritually replaced by another stage with similar inspiration. The final accessible multiplayer stage is none other than Saffron City, repping the Pokemon fighters. This stage sees the players fight atop rooftops of skyscrapers found in Saffron City, the biggest city in Pokemon Red and Blue versions. The main building is Silphco, the site of Team Rocket's takeover at the climax of the game. During the course of battle, the doors on the Silphco building will open up, and a random Pokemon can appear, with a variety of effects. First is Venusaur, who can use Razor Leaf to damage players. Next is Charmander, who can blast out Flamethrower to damage players. Then we have Electrode, who will roll out of the doors, chill for a moment, and then use Explosion, causing massive damage and knockback. Next, Porygon, who simply blasts out at a high speed as a sort of surprise attack. Lastly is Chansey, who instead is a helpful Pokemon. She will spawn an egg that contains an item inside, and additionally she will instead heal players on contact, unlike every other Pokemon on this list, which all deal damage on contact. There are also occasionally Pokemon that fly by in the background, though they all serve no function as a hazard. These Pokemon are Butterfree, Pidgey, Fearow, and rarest of all, the legendary bird Moltres. Now, despite covering all of the accessible multiplayer stages, there are 3 stages in Smash 64 that, for all intents and purposes, should be multiplayer stages. They're all just locked behind single-player modes. So we'll break some rules and we'll briefly talk about these. First, we have what is officially named Duel Zone in Smash 64, but would later become the standard layout for the stage known as Battlefield. This is an original stage to Smash, and in Smash 64 serves as a location for battles against the Fighting Polygon team in the game's one-player mode, and it does fit the style of the Fighting Polygons pretty well. This stage would go on to have a counterpart in every single other Smash game, though this design has never been reused. Instead, the tri-platform and general stage construction has all been the same, with different designs in every entry. The other stage that doesn't exist in 64's multiplayer, but does in future Smash games, is Final Destination. Once again, this is a Smash original design, a completely flat stage. This stage was originally designed as the perfect stage to fight Master Hand, the boss of 64's one-player game, as there are no walls or platforms to aid in avoiding all of his attacks. Final Destination also received versions in all future Smash titles that were actually playable in multiplayer, again, each with their own designs. And the final pseudo-multiplayer stage in Smash 64 is Meta Crystal. Meta Crystal is kind of a mixture of Smash Original and also inspired by Super Mario 64. This stage was created to better fit the fight against Metal Mario in one-player game, with the inspiration coming from the Cavern of the Metal Cap from Mario 64. In that game, Metal Mario is simply a power-up that Mario can obtain for a short while Smash really was the first game to consider this a fully separate entity from standard Mario. The Cavern of the Metal Cap has all kinds of crystals all over the place leading up to the Metal Cap switch, and this stage in Smash has crystals all over the stage as well as the background image. Aside from this connection, however, the stage is pretty much an original design for Smash. Unfortunately, this stage has never graduated to full multiplayer stage in any future Smash title, but it felt wrong to leave it out because it does really seem like a multiplayer stage. As a result, this is the only single-player stage that we'll actually talk about in this video. Next, it's time to move on to Melee, which has way more stages to talk about. So let's start with Princess Peach's Castle. This stage served as a sort of upgrade of the Peach's Castle stage from Smash 64, being a more faithful representation of the outside of the castle from Mario 64. However, it isn't without its liberties. First, texture-wise, the stage looks rather different. The colors are now a bit more muted. The spire in the center of the stage is also scaled down, and the top of the tower has been fully removed, making it more reasonable to traverse the stage. Over the course of the match, multiple switches spawn, and when hit, blocks matching the color will appear. This concept has appeared in both Super Mario World and Super Mario 64, so this is sort of a fusion of those two ideas, though the blocks themselves are missing the expected exclamation marks. Just like in those games, items will appear from these blocks. However, instead of being specific items designated for each color, random items will appear. If item spawns are set to none, these blocks still appear, but they simply serve as additional platforms. Bonsai bills will also spawn during this match, and will slowly move towards the castle before making contact and causing a huge explosion. Bonsai bills first appeared in Super Mario World as well, though at the time they never caused a giant explosion, making that aspect a Smash original for the time. The next Mario Universe stage in Melee is Rainbow Cruise. This stage is an auto-scroller that starts out on a flying pirate ship before moving to a variety of blocks found in the Mario series and ultimately looping back around to the pirate ship again. Most of these elements are pulled from Rainbow Ride, one of the final worlds of Super Mario 64. However, much has been adjusted in order to serve as a better stage in Smash. For instance, the pirate ship does exist in Rainbow Ride, but it looks drastically different and it never actually moves. Instead, Mario rides around in this world on magic carpets that follow rainbow paths, which are used later on in other parts of the stage. The overall layout is also largely original, though as I said, the elements used throughout do exist in Super Mario 64. Additionally, seeing mountains in the background is fully Smash original, as nothing like this exists in Mario 64. You can also see a little small village sitting on one of these mountains, which again doesn't exist in the game of origin. Now let's talk Mushroom Kingdom. While this shares the name with the Smash 64 stage, it's a completely new version of a similar concept, once again based on the original Super Mario Bros. Aesthetic. Again, we have brick blocks, though this time they can actually be broken by attacking or jumping into them. Question mark blocks also spawn, and with items enabled, will result in a random item appearing out of them when they're hit. This stage also has balance lifts just like Mushroom Kingdom 64, and they function in precisely the same way. Unlike the previous version of this stage, this one unfortunately does not have functional warp pipes. And as an Easter egg, if you angle the camera past the typical boundary, you can see a danger sign, which is a fun nod to that area serving as the blast zones for the stage. And next we have Mushroom Kingdom 2. Ironically, despite the name, this stage doesn't originate from any location found canonically in the Mushroom Kingdom. Instead, it's based on the Land of Dreams or Subcon, the setting of Super Mario Bros. 2 or Super Mario USA. They probably just rolled with Mushroom Kingdom 2 as a name to indicate that it's a Mario stage, especially since at the time virtually no one knew the name of Mario 2's setting. The elements found in the stage come from the overworld segments of Mario 2, particularly from World 1-1. Stylistically, the stage is based on the remake of Super Mario Bros. 2 found in Super Mario All-Stars, rather than from the original for the NES. The center features a waterfall that has falling logs, which can serve as platforms, pulled directly from such a segment in World 1-1. Additionally, 2 enemies spawn on the stage. The first is Pidgeot, a small bird on a magic carpet. While this is normally a defeatable enemy in the original game, and the carpet becomes controllable, in Smash, Pidgeot instead shows up occasionally and can be used as a platform. The other enemy that spawns is Birdo, who will walk in from the edges on either the left or right side, and she fires eggs towards the players that can hit them and deal damage. Birdo is a recurring boss in Super Mario Bros. 2, and their main source of damage is firing rounds of eggs at the player as well. Our next stage in Melee is Congo Jungle, not to be confused with that one. This one spells Congo with a K. To avoid confusion though, this stage's return in Smash Ultimate renames this to Congo Falls. This stage takes place on the edge of a waterfall, with platforms built on top of rocks jutting out the side. Despite sharing the name with Donkey Kong Country's first world, this stage isn't pulled from any specific part of these games, though certain elements are pulled from the trilogy. The log platform secured with rope is a general design used throughout the Donkey Kong Country games. In the background, we can see Donkey Kong's treehouse, which notably appears on the Congo Jungle world map, as well as in the first level of Donkey Kong Country, though it doesn't exist anywhere near a waterfall like it does in this stage. Claptrap enemies, which first appeared in Donkey Kong Country, occasionally fall over the edge of the waterfall, and if a player happens to be there, they can deal massive damage and knockback. The bottom also has yet another barrel cannon that moves back and forth, and similar to the Smash 64 stage, can catch a player and blast them in the direction that the arrow is pointing. The other newly introduced Donkey Kong stage for Melee is Jungle Japes. This stage takes place above a river, with the main platform in the center and 2 smaller platforms on either side of it. In both the later appearances of this stage in Brawl and Ultimate, it's possible to swim in the river, making it possible to jump out of the water and back onto the platforms. In Melee and Smash for 3DS, swimming is not possible, and you essentially sink like a rock if you aren't careful. This stage once again is a mishmash of elements from the Donkey Kong Country series. Log platforms above water, the barrel house to the left, and the palm trees in the background can all be found throughout the Donkey Kong Country games. Claptrap enemies can also hop up out of the water, and just like in the previous stage, can deal massive damage to players hit by them. The center platform also features Cranky's cabin in the background, naturally where Cranky Kong lives throughout the Donkey Kong series. However, while this cabin first appeared in the Country series, its appearance in Smash is based on the most recent appearance at the time of Melee's release, its appearance from Donkey Kong 64. In this game, Cranky Kong is a scientist that offers all of the Kong's various ability upgrades. You can see Cranky's silhouette in this cabin, and you can also see the various test tubes and glassware that he uses as well. The name for this stage is also more based on Donkey Kong 64 than the Country games, with Jungle Japes literally being the name of the first world in Donkey Kong 64. Up next, we have Great Bay. This Zelda stage is inspired by the Great Bay region in Termina, the setting of The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask. On the stage, we have 2 man-made platforms, along with a rock structure on the left, and occasionally a giant turtle on the right. The 2 center platforms are essentially pulled straight from Majora's Mask. However, they've been oriented to the right instead, allowing for an extra platform to fight on. If they were kept as they are in Majora's Mask, the bottom platform would be behind the main platform, inaccessible to fighters. The building on this main platform is the Marine Research Laboratory, a location that Link visits several times during his adventure in Termina. On the lower platform, there's also an owl statue, which in Majora's Mask functionally serve as warp points that are scattered all over the map. One of these does exist on this platform in the original game, however in Smash it has again been oriented slightly differently in order to face the player. The giant turtle that appears is also a key plot point in Majora's Mask, allowing Link to travel to the Great Bay Temple, though it never really appears in this exact area in the game. Additionally, another friend appears on this stage, Tingle. Tingle was first introduced in Majora's Mask, but has since become a regular staple in the Zelda series. Tingle can blow up his balloon and float in the air, acting as a mid-air platform. However, if a hitbox hits the balloon, it will pop, and Tingle will come plummeting down. This comes straight from Majora's Mask, where Link needs to fire a projectile at Tingle's balloon in order to get him to the ground, where Link can then speak to him and purchase maps from him. Finally, the background effectively plays out the big danger in Majora's Mask. As the match goes on, the moon will get closer and closer to the Earth until it looks like it's about to hit. Then, the 4 giants, each freed by Link by conquering their respective temples, will appear to halt the moon before throwing it back up into the sky, where this cycle repeats. This plays on a 3-minute loop during the course of the match, which is a reference to the 3-day time cycle that serves as the core mechanic in Majora's Mask. The other brand new Zelda stage introduced in Melee is one of the most well-known in perhaps the entire Smash series, Temple. This is a huge stage with multiple levels, platforms, and the Pit of Doom down at the bottom. The general atmosphere of this stage is loosely based on the appearance of temples in Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link for the NES, in both the actual temple appearance as well as their design in the overworld. However, the stage layout itself is completely original to Smash, not particularly based on the appearance of any area found in Zelda 2. Moving on, we have the first new Metroid stage introduced in Melee, Brinstar. If you did a double take thinking this stage was already covered, I really wouldn't blame you. Brinstar is a sort of reworked evolution of the Smash 64 stage, Planet Zebes. Same overall theme, same rising and falling acid that hurts you, just on a much smaller scale. Brinstar is the very first location you begin the original Metroid in, and the second location you visit in Super Metroid. While the elements of this stage are borrowed from these two games, the overall look and design of the stage is mostly unique to Smash. Many of the references are the same as for the Planet Zebes stage, since Brinstar is a location found on that planet. In the middle of the main platform, in the background, we can see a Chozo statue. These are found throughout the Metroid series, usually holding on to an item upgrade. Occasionally another variant, called Torizos, are capable of walking around and attacking Samus. This Chozo statue is capable of walking around in Smash, however, it simply will walk around a bit before sitting back down, with no effect on gameplay whatsoever. There's also a large clump of round organic things on the bottom of the main platform, and when attacked, these will be destroyed and cause the stage to partially separate. Similarly, the two side platforms are both attached by some kind of fleshy growth, and can also take several hits before breaking and causing these platforms to shift at an angle. Both of these could be nods to the nature of Metroid games, where you destroy blocks or parts of the environment in order to change aspects of a room or open up access to a new area. The other Metroid stage is also a Brinstar one, Brinstar Depths. This is an all-new stage, unlike the previous one, and it's pretty wild. It starts on a large floating island of sorts with other platforms nearby, pretty unevenly designed. You'll also notice the giant monster in the background. That's Kraid, a mini-boss that first appeared in Metroid before getting promoted to full boss in Super Metroid. Regularly throughout the match, Kraid will rotate the stage, causing players to prioritize getting to safety or being risky and going for cheeky kills. This rotation of the stage is a completely Smash original design, as is pretty much everything going on with this stage, as it bears no resemblance to Kraid's lair in either Metroid or Super Metroid. This stage being named Brinstar Depths is simply observational, with Kraid's lair literally being deep within Brinstar. In the jump from Melee to Ultimate, Kraid gets a much more refined and polished model. Outside of this though, the stage is pretty much entirely the same, just prettier and in true HD. Time for another stage that reuses a previously used name, Yoshi's Island. This time around, the Yoshi's Island stage is built off of the appearance of Yoshi's Island as it appears in the first world of Super Mario World. The general aesthetic of the foreground and background, the big hills, all of this is peak Super Mario World. In particular, the diagonal pipes are also taken straight from the first level of the game. In the center, we have rotating blocks, which were first introduced in Super Mario World. In that game, if you jump into them or spin them with a cape, they start to rotate, making it possible to pass through them. Likewise, the same is true for Smash, making that center pit potentially dangerous if you aren't careful. Occasionally, a fish and Lakitu carrying a 1-up mushroom and a bonsai bill will fly by in the background, both enemies that debuted in Super Mario World. The other Yoshi stage introduced in Melee is Yoshi's Story, of course named after the N64 game. Like the Super Happy Tree stage from Smash 64, this stage also has the paper, cardboard, and fabric aesthetics taken from the storybook design found in Yoshi's Story. Flying Shy Guys are a stage hazard on this stage, capable of being hit by player attacks. If items are on, they will carry food and drop it when attacked. Otherwise, they'll carry nothing, but still serve as a hazard for the stage. On the sides of the stage are dashed lines that serve as a track for a happy little cloud, given the nickname Randall in the Smash community. This cloud moves along this track throughout the entirety of the match, making it possible for players to land on it rather than go for the ledge or the stage. This cloud is taken from the level Rail Lift in Yoshi's Story, which features Yoshi riding this same cloud along a series of rails to progress through the level. Finally, in the background we can see Pac-E-Durm, a weird half-elephant, half-egg looking guy, walking back and forth on the stage holding a stop sign. design. Pachyderm gets in the way of Yoshi during Yoshi's story, requiring a ground pound to progress. However, here in Smash, he just walks back and forth as a silly little guy. Next, let's move on to the Fountain of Dreams. This stage is originally based on the Fountain of Dreams found in Kirby's Adventure and Kirby Superstar, a fountain found on planet Popstar that supplies good dreams to those living in Dreamland. However, the developers seem to have taken an opportunity with the Smash stage to redesign how this fountain looks, as it looks quite different from its original appearances. Nevertheless, the core concept of a fountain remains, and the majority of the main stage section is covered in water. Additionally, there are 3 platforms, with the left and right ones rising and lowering depending on the stream of water beneath them. This redesign of Fountain of Dreams actually extends into the main Kirby series, with this being the basis for how the fountain looks in games made after Melee's release. It's always kinda neat when Smash influences future games based on its representation of their series. The other new Kirby stage introduced in Melee is Green Greens. This stage features 3 chunks of land, each connected by various yellow star or sometimes bomb blocks, which have both appeared in Kirby games. Prominently in the center of the stage, of course, is Wispy Woods, who has uprooted his life from Dreamland in order to come to this stage instead. Like on Dreamland, Wispy will occasionally blow wind either left or right, causing players to move. Unlike on Dreamland, Wispy will also shake occasionally and drop apples, which can either be eaten to heal up some damage or be thrown as a projectile. Both of these are Wispy's main means of attack in the Kirby games. Very basic, considering he's typically the first boss of each game. Green Greens is the first level of Kirby's Dreamland for the Game Boy. However, this stage instead takes its design cues from the first stage of Popstar in Kirby 64, The Crystal Shards, sort of a fusion of these 2 first levels. We have yet another spiritual successor to a Smash 64 stage up next, Corneria from the Star Fox series. This is probably the closest that a successor has been to its previous counterpart, with the fight still taking place on the Great Fox. This time though, the Great Fox is scaled down in size so that the characters are proportionally bigger to the ship compared to Smash 64, and the blast zones are more reasonably closer to the stage. Arwing will still occasionally fly down and fire double lasers, joined now by Wolfen, also firing lasers on the Great Fox. The front cannons can act as a platform for players to stand on, but they also fire 2 massive lasers occasionally that almost always KO. The biggest change is of course the background, with it now being, as indicated by the name, the level Corneria, a recurring location in the Star Fox series. This specific version is based on the first level from Star Fox 64, Corneria, and it follows the same path that Team Star Fox does during the events of the game. This stage appeared in both Brawl and Smash for 3DS relatively unchanged. However, in Ultimate, the appearance has had a big overhaul. In this version, it is now based on Corneria as it appears in Star Fox Zero, the latest entry in the series for the Wii U that serves as a reimagining of the events of Star Fox 64. Next, we turn things 90 degrees and move on to Venom. This stage also features the Great Fox, however instead of facing to the left, it now faces directly at the viewer, drastically decreasing the amount of surface that players have to utilize. As the name suggests, this stage is a recreation of the level Venom, the final level of Star Fox 64. In Star Fox, Venom is a sort of barren wasteland. However, in Smash, they've instead gone ahead and interpreted this to also have a ton of volcanic craters and lava everywhere. There are also plenty of rock formations and a giant cave the Great Fox traverses through. Ironically though, the Great Fox is never seen in this level in Star Fox, as Team Star Fox pilots their R-Wings instead. This stage does have R-Wings and Wolfens appear though, and just like on Corneria, they will fire lasers down on the players. Next, let's make our way to Kanto and talk about Pokemon Stadium. This stadium is clearly meant to be used for Pokemon battles, but Smash has completely co-opted it for its silly little party game. In the background, we can see a big Jumbotron, which will show a variety of things: footage of characters fighting, the current player rankings, the timer, and the upcoming form the stage will take, because this stage is also a transforming stage. There are 4 different forms aside from its standard layout that this stage can take on. The Jumbotron will indicate a typing symbol, and the transformation will rise out of the bottom. These transformations are a grass form with wooden platforms in the center, a tree with a branch that serves as a platform, and some forestry elements in the background. A fire form, which features basically the aftermath of a forest fire, with dying trees and a half-burnt down house. A water form, which features a small pool of water, some fountains holding up platforms, and a big windmill that can be walked on. And a rock form, which summons terrain that represents a small canyon with a mine shaft with platforms in the middle. While it's definitely possible that the base form of this stage is inspired by the stadiums that were found in the game of the same name, Pokemon Stadium, the battlefield transformation aspect is never seen in any core Pokemon games. However, it was a big detail used during the first season of the Pokemon anime when Ash was competing in the Indigo Plateau Conference. The preliminary rounds of this conference had the trainers competing on 4 different battlefield types: rock, grass, water, and ice. While the actual designs used in Smash are pretty much original, there's no doubt that this detail in the anime would have inspired the creation of this stage. The other Pokemon stage introduced in Melee is the ever-popular Pokefloats. This is a stage that, as the game indicates, takes place above the Kanto skies. These giant Pokemon floats serve as the ground fighters can walk and fight on, and they will float in and out of the frame in the playable area. The Pokemon featured in this stage are, in order of appearance, Squirtle, Onix, Psyduck, Chikorita, Weezing, Slowpoke, Porygon, Wooper, Sudowoodo, Snorlax, Venusaur, Seal, Wobbuffet, Unknown, Goldeen, Lickitung, Chansey, and Geodude. Honestly, this stage must have been some kind of drug-induced fever dream that they decided to make real, because there is zero source material for any of this. This is unfortunately another stage that has never seen a return beyond its debut game, leaving it behind in Melee. Next, we have the first ever F-Zero stage in Smash history, Mute City. This stage is a pretty faithful recreation of Mute City 1 from F-Zero X for the Nintendo 64. The fight moves on a platform throughout the raceway, moving to different points along the track before pausing at various sections. These sections have you fight directly on the raceway, occasionally with new platforms that are raised up. When the platform is about to raise and move away again, a Go icon appears at the top, accompanied by a sound effect. This same sound effect plays when a racer crosses the finish line in a race. Throughout the fight, vehicles are regularly speeding by, potentially hitting any fighters, or being hit by fighters. Ultimately, the stage is pretty faithful to the original track outside of the platforms that spawn in. The only exception I can see is the energy panels known as pits, which in F-Zero refill a vehicle's energy, but in Smash basically just act like ice physics, making it a slippery area for the players to run on. This is yet another stage that has never seen a return in any future Smash game. Our other F-Zero stage is Big Blue, naturally also based on a raceway from the F-Zero series. This one in particular pulls inspiration from both forms of Big Blue found on the standard version of F-Zero X for the N64. As opposed to Mute City, Big Blue features a race with F-Zero vehicles, but from the side perspective, with the vehicles serving as potential platforms as well. The main part of the stage is Captain Falcon's ship, the Falcon Flyer, considerably bigger than the standard vehicles. The Falcon Flyer's only appearance in the F-Zero series doesn't even take place in the games. Instead, it appears in the manual for the original F-Zero, so Sakurai was really using the deep cuts for this stage. The stage itself doesn't actually follow the path of an actual track like Mute City did. Instead, this is a randomly generated track. Many parts of the Big Blue stages in F-Zero X are completely missing from Smash, and other parts have been added that weren't present in the first place. Overall, it mostly just seems to use the theming Big Blue has while doing its own Smash original thing. In both Melee and Brawl, the vehicles are based on their designs from F-Zero X for the N64. However, in the upgrade it got in Ultimate, the cars were updated to instead be based on the vehicles designed from F-Zero GX, the sequel that was made for the GameCube. Now let's move on to Onett, the hometown of Ness. This stage is made up of 3 buildings, a yellow with a red roof, a light blue with a darker roof, and the brick drugstore in the center. The blue house bears resemblance to houses found in Earthbound, while the drugstore is an actual location found in Earthbound. This store has 1 awning in the actual game, while in Smash it was given 2 and was made a bit taller, just for some variety. Likewise, the house on the left side bears no resemblance to houses in Earthbound, and was again likely changed up to just be different from the blue house. The background also shows us a bit more, aside from the generic houses. We can see the hospital, Ness and Porky's houses, and the meteorite at the top of the hill seen at the very start of Earthbound. This stage also features multiple cars that regularly drive recklessly past the fighters, and can potentially hit them for massive damage. First, there are 2 generic cars, a teal one and a magenta one. Then there's also a taxi cab, which was possibly derived from the Mad Taxi enemy that's found in Earthbound. And finally, we have the Runaway 5's black van, which is more directly associated with Ness & Co. during the events of the game. Off-screen, you can also see other elements of Onett, such as the hotel and the arcade. More detailed, but still off-screen, is the Onett message board, based on similar signs that are found around Onett in Earthbound. In Smash, this states, "Caution, a black van driven by this guy has been spotted racing recklessly through town. Be careful." An image of a man accompanies the sign, with the man being Lucky, one of the Runaway 5 members. And then we have Fourside, another Earthbound series stage. Fourside places the fighters at the top of multiple skyscrapers in the city of Fourside at night, with a little bit of construction going on as well. Interestingly, if we look at Fourside from Earthbound, it really doesn't match with the Smash stage at all. The overall presentation seems to be Smash original, however both Fourside in Earthbound and in Smash share the inspiration of being based off of New York City. It's also possible that this stage was inspired by Moonside, the parallel dimension version of Fourside, which takes place at night with lots of neon lights everywhere. Regardless of what the inspiration was though, they elected to make this more like a real-life city than anything from the games. The central building on the stage is the Monotoli building, a main location of the story of Earthbound. The building in Smash, just like the building in Earthbound, also contains a helipad that a helicopter periodically lands and flies away from. In Melee, this helicopter is rather generic, however in Ultimate, it resembles the helicopter as it is actually portrayed in Earthbound. One liberty that Smash has taken is the left building, which appears to be the Dinosaur Museum of Fourside. This is neither a skyscraper nor is it anywhere near the Monotoli building in the real game, but it does allow for some variety on the stage rather than just having another generic building. Throughout the match, a UFO will appear periodically, allowing the players to fight on it for a short time before disappearing. The surface of this UFO is almost ice or oil-like, making it very slippery. While actual UFOs are pretty rare throughout the story of Earthbound, this UFO is most likely taken from the opening cinematic ahead of the title screen, which features multiple giant UFOs attacking a town. In fact, when this UFO comes down from above, it uses the exact same sound effect as this opening cinematic. The second to last stage introduced in Melee is Icicle Mountain, the home stage of the Ice Climbers. This stage is an auto-scroller, going both up and down, requiring players to fight and be decent at platforming at the same time. This stage is clearly high atop a mountain, with lots of snow and ice on the various platforms, naturally fitting in with the theme of the Ice Climbers. Conceptually, this stage is a creative extension of the levels found in Ice Climber, where the climber needs to jump up to the top of the screen in order to complete the level. There are some elements indicating ice-like terrain, such as ice blocks or polar bears. However, the limitations of the NES prevented them from designing an actual icy mountain. It was always just implied based on the game mechanics. So, Melee took the opportunity to take this to its logical conclusion and make it mountainous terrain. The polar bear is an enemy from Ice Climber, however, it's almost become a secondary mascot of sorts, appearing in every single Ice Climber stage in Smash. In the US versions of the game, there are these small Yeti-like creatures called Topies. However, in the Japanese version of the game, Topies are seal-like creatures instead. This is an extension of the localization for Ice Climber on the NES, where the seal enemy appeared in Japan, but was changed to a Yeti in North America. And the final stage in Super Smash Bros. Melee for the Nintendo GameCube is Flat Zone. This stage literally takes place inside of a Game & Watch device, with the playable area existing inside of the handheld screen. The first ever Game & Watch released in 1980 as small LCD devices that had pretty basic games, and the character Mr. Game & Watch is a conglomeration of these different games into a single character. Flat Zone squishes all characters down to be two-dimensional. They also make the same beeping noise as Mr. Game & Watch when they walk. This stage is largely based on the Game & Watch game Helmet. Layout-wise, it's quite similar, and the actual physical layout of the device is exactly the same as well, with the sole exception that Helmet on the right side is replaced by the words Smash Bros. Additionally, the stage has other elements from other games. The character from Manhole, which fills in gaps in platforms, and the character from Oil Panic spilling oil, making it a slippery surface for fighters. This stage technically doesn't make a return in this exact form, but it does have a successor that we'll talk about later. And that's gonna do it for now. Next time we are going to dive into Brawl and Smash for 3DS, and there is still plenty more to talk about. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you all in the next video. Peace out, and please remember to be good to one another.